I don't hate what Minnesota's done. Like
Okay.
I think that they need to be different, and they just need to be a stable, good team.
Yeah.
I think we get caught up in, oh, there was a big move made. Oh, they gave up this many picks. Oh, they're not even that close to NBA title. The Timberwolves, yes, they're not close to an NBA title, but if they're closer to stability, that's a really good thing for that franchise. Like they haven't made the postseason like 2 years in a row since like KG, right?
Yeah, I think it's something like that.
I
Yeah,
mean,
it's been a very long time.
and they're likely to do that. If they stay healthy, I think Rudy Gobert raises the ceiling of your team in the regular season significantly.
Yeah.
And
And the floor for what it's worth, which is
yeah,
important for them.
without a doubt. And I think that they could be fighting for home court advantage and fighting to get into round two, which is something, and I know people want to make fun of that or say that it's not worth it. You have to remember, like, different NBA franchises have different goals. Like, not everybody feels like they can take the group they have and make it into a championship team. And maybe this group could get there because we don't know what Anthony Edwards is going to look like next year. I mean, that's one of the big things is he was awesome last year and he's got a ways to go. And I think Rudy Gobert just helps them. And did they give up a lot? Yes. Did they give up too much? Yes. But that's okay. I think you can be a Timberwolves fan, like feel okay with your team because I think they're going to be successful next year. And they still have young guys that are growing. I think Jaden McDaniels is a guy that could grow alongside these guys as well. Um, and I like getting Slow Mo up there. I think that he adds some versatility where he can play with either big. Uh,
Yep.
I like what they did. I think they're going to be a really good team next year. And yes, did they give up future picks that could be very valuable? Sure, but you're adding stability to your franchise.
So I want to start here. I kind of did like a bit of a dive into the age part of it. I
Mhm.
still don't like the idea of them going all in some respect before Anthony Edwards is likely to be ready to carry the offensive load at the level to which he needs to be able to consistently in the playoffs.
Mhm.
Uh, we're going to see flashes from Ant over the course of the next 2 years in the playoffs. I think at a really high level, but we see it with younger guys in the playoffs, like Jason Tatum has taken time.
Yep.
Kevin Durant. You were a Thunder fan, like Kevin Durant went through his lumps in the playoffs, right? LeBron James went through his lumps. The best players of all time went through their lumps. I don't like Michael Jordan went through his lumps early on in the playoffs. He was great, but like the odds are extremely high. Anthony Edwards at 21 years old is not going to be ready to carry a perimeter attack to an NBA championship.
Yeah.
Just based off of history, not based off of anything Ant has shown, although somewhat based off of the consistency that Ant has shown at this point, even if the flashes are elite. One thing that is interesting, though, is the bigs that have made, let's say, there are 227 players in NBA history that have made at least 3 All-Star games.
Mm-hmm.
Rudy Gobert is one of them. There are 180 players that have made between 3 and 8 All-Star games. And that kind of removes like the top 50 guys of all time, right? And I don't think Rudy is commensurate with those players
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day. I do think that like the way to describe these guys is basically, not generational, but era defining in some way, shape, or form, because Rudy Gobert is an era defining center, let's say, in the way that his game has shaped analytics discussion, in the way that, his rim protection has become valued, in the way that, just a number of different factors here, right? I think era defining, but not generational is probably the best way to describe Rudy Gobert. There are more guys among those 180 players that were centers and, like, frankly, in a lot of cases, defense first guys that maintained their value past 30 years old. So Artis Gilmore was an all-star deep into his 30s. He didn't make an all-defense team after the time he was 30, but he maintained all-star value. Nate Thurmond made all-defense teams until he was 33. Marc Gasol was an all-star until he was 32.
Yeah.
Pau Gasol had those weird Bulls seasons that nobody remembers, and nobody should remember, because what a bizarre couple of seasons that was. But he made the all-star team in the watered down Eastern Conference into his mid-30s. I think he was 36 the last time he made one. Rasheed Wallace hung on as an all-star until he was 34. Ben Wallace was like an all-defense player until he was 32. Al Horford was an all-star until he was 32. Larry Nance Sr. made all-star teams and all-defense teams until he was 34 years old. Alonzo Mourning made all-star teams until he was 32, but was done as an all-defense guy by the time he was 30. And then the best case is Dikembe Mutombo, who won a Defensive Player of the Year award at 35 years old, and was essentially like an all-defense guy consistently in his early 30s. So that's actually like a bigger list than what I think gets discussed.
Yeah.
Among like these guys that have between 3 and 8 career all-star appearances. And Rudy Gobert is renowned as someone who takes really good care of his body. The thing that worries me on some level is that, let's say he is 32. Like, it seems like the average among that group that actually aged well, and this doesn't count guys like, Willis Reed, X, Y, and Z that were done by the time they were 30 making all-star teams. So there are a few of them, right? But even among these guys that aged well into their 30s, the average was probably 32, which makes me think that Rudy's 33 and 34 years old, seasons here, probably not going to be incredible, but that's probably the time when Anthony Edwards is most likely to be ready.
Yeah.
And you would think, again, 33 and 34-year-old Rudy Gobert on a large contract is probably not going to be a wildly valuable trade chip to other teams to recoup some of the value you lost if this doesn't go well. And on top of it, you just really limited your options, especially mid-season in the trade market, because of the step-in rule moving forward. Like, they can't actually trade a future first-round pick anymore here. On top of that, they actually, like, I like the guys that they traded too. I'm not like an enormous Walker Kessler fan, but they were clearly. Leandro Bolmaro averaged like 16, 6, and 6 in the G League this year. He's actually like pretty interesting as a bigger ball handler. Former first-round pick in 2020. Just 21 years old. They also give up the 4 firsts, but like Jared Vanderbilt, I think is worth like a late first round pick. Like, he's an effective defensive basketball player that I thought was on the borderline of getting all defense votes last year. Patrick Beverly, Malik Beasley, like, there's a chance that Utah is going to be able to flip these guys. It's too much to give up, but I actually do think Minnesota is going to be good. And I think that it's possible that aging conversation around Rudy Gobert has maybe been overstated a little bit, especially given that, like, he was very good last year. Like, he was incredible last year defensively again.
Yeah. And sometimes getting into a new situation can rejuvenate you a little bit, because obviously that situation was stale and everybody knew it. It was stale a year ago and everybody knew it. And so I think getting to a new situation can be helpful. And if this Timberwolves team just becomes as successful as the Memphis Grizzlies were with Zebo and Marc Gasol, they went to a conference finals, we're just in the playoffs every year. That rejuvenated that fan base so significantly.
Yeah.
That
it did.
You wonder if that could happen in Minnesota too. Because the reason that a lot of people that are Grizzlies fans now it's because of those teams, and those situations just matter so much. I mean, ask the Pelicans, who just made the playoffs, pushed the Suns. Had that not happened, like, how are you feeling as a Pelicans fan today? You know, like those moments, I know that we think of them as insignificant because they didn't go to the finals or they didn't win the NBA title. But when we're talking about fan bases that have been lost in the desert
Yeah.
for 15 years or whatever it is, just having good teams matters. And
Yeah.
they haven't been able, I mean, they tried to build through the draft for how long? It took, they proved that was not a great path for them. And they
Yeah.
have, and they also, there's also like new ownership and they want to make a splash
Yeah.
and they got somebody good in. I mean, to me, it's easy to dunk on the Timberwolves just because they gave up too many future assets for a guy who's close to 30.
Yeah.
I get that. If the Thunder did that, I would be crushing them today because I think it would be the wrong thing for them to do. However, sometimes you just have to pull yourself out of the muck and just be a good, solid team. And I think that that's okay. I think that those kind of moves are okay, just to help rejuvenate the fan base a little bit.
Yeah, and there are benefits to being a good solid team when it comes to getting someone in on the mid-level exception,
Sure.
right? There are value-based assessments when it comes to being able to, for instance, acquire someone like DeAnthony Melton for the number 23 overall pick
Yep.
uh, on draft night, because Minnesota, even though they can't trade forward-looking picks, they can move their picks on draft night if they decide they need a veteran
Yep.
moving forward. So, yeah, I don't love the deal,
Yeah,
and
I agree.
it's not a deal I would have made.
Hmm.
There's also a pick swap in there in 2026, and two of these picks are after Rudy Gobert's contract is up, and you have to hope that Anthony Edwards just goes God mode, right? Like, this is an enormous bet on Anthony Edwards just being like incredible, and I love Anthony Edwards, but just historically, it's hard to bet on a guy that's this young to be that motherfucker in the playoffs, basically.
Yeah, it is very, very rare. Uh,
Yeah.
However, we're talking about the Timberwolves being in the playoffs, which
Yeah. Which
just
is great.
which is just okay. I'm not saying
Yeah.
that this is like a slam dunk, a home run for them. I don't, but I just think that it's just sometimes too easy to dunk on these teams when it's like, man, like you haven't been through what we've been through, and to just come out as a competent team is an okay outcome for a lot
Yeah.
of franchises.
Yeah. And I think I probably went a little bit harder on the trade in my immediate impact when the sticker shock was just like,
Yeah, I think
what in the entire fuck did they just do?
I know.
Versus now, like, really diving into it and being like, not what I would have done, but I can see the pathway here at the
Yeah.
very least.